There is a bird in the rainforests of northern Australia and New Guinea that has been on this planet for longer than the concept of fear itself. It stands nearly 2 meters tall. It weighs up to 85 kilograms. It cannot fly. It does not need to. It has a casque on its head like a helmet, skin colored in blues and reds, so vivid they look painted, and eyes that hold an expression most people describe the same way when they see it for the first time. Not curious, not afraid, evaluating. The cassowary is often called the world's most dangerous bird. That title understates the situation, because danger implies unpredictability, a thing that might go wrong. The cassowary is not unpredictable. It is precise, it is territorial, and it is armed with a weapon so specific, so purpose-built for destruction, that evolutionary biologists still argue about how something so extreme came to exist on an animal that eats fruit. The cassowary has a claw on its inner toe that measures up to 12 centimeters in length, straight, rigid, and tapered to a point like a short sword. It doesn't scratch with this claw. It doesn't use it for climbing or digging. It kicks, a powerful forward kick with legs strong enough to break bones, and that claw does the rest. It punctures, it slices, it disembowels. This is not a bird that evolved to look dangerous. It evolved to be dangerous. And the difference between those two things is everything. Most people who encounter cassowary footage for the first time focus on the casque, that hollow, keratin-covered crest rising from the top of the skull. It looks ceremonial, almost decorative, like something a creature would wear to be taken seriously. Scientists are still not entirely certain what it is for. Leading theories suggest it may amplify low-frequency vocalizations, help the bird push through dense vegetation, or serve as a dominance signal between individuals. What they do know is that the cassowary produces sounds at frequencies so low they fall below the threshold of human hearing. Infrasound, the same register used by elephants and whales to communicate across vast distances. You can be standing next to a cassowary and not hear it communicating with another cassowary a kilometer away. That detail should sit with you for a moment. Beneath all of the visible strangeness, the helmet, the colors, the dagger claw, there is an animal operating on a sensory and communicative level that is partly invisible to us. We see a bird. We are not seeing everything the bird is. The cassowary belongs to a group called ratites, flightless birds that include ostriches, emus, rheas, and kiwis. All of them are ancient. But the cassowary's lineage in its current rainforest form stretches back tens of millions of years, predating most of the ecosystems it now inhabits. It is not an animal that adapted to the rainforest. It is an animal the rainforest adapted around. It stands inside a food web not simply as a consumer, but as an architect. The cassowary is one of the only animals large enough to swallow certain rainforest fruits whole and disperse their seeds intact across wide enough distances to sustain those plant species. Remove the cassowary from the ecosystem, and specific trees begin to disappear. Remove those trees, and the cascade continues outward in ways researchers are only beginning to map. This is not merely dangerous. This is irreplaceable. Let's be precise about what the inner claw actually is, because the descriptions in most wildlife articles soften something that deserves to be stated directly. The cassowary's dagger claw, located on the second toe of each foot, is not primarily used for foraging, for self-defense against predators, or for territorial marking. It is a weapon optimized for close-quarters combat with large animals. The kick that delivers it is driven by legs whose muscular structure is closer to a kangaroo's than a typical bird's. The force generated in a single forward kick has been documented as sufficient to break human ribs, fracture femurs, and in the right circumstances, penetrate the abdominal cavity. It doesn't rake. It drives forward like a thrust, directly into whatever is in front of it. If that happens to be a person who has fallen to the ground, the mechanics of the attack become significantly more dangerous. Cassowaries do not typically pursue prey. They do not hunt. But when they feel threatened, cornered, or when a human being does something the bird reads as a challenge, approaching too quickly, standing between a female and her chicks, or simply being in the wrong place at a moment of territorial stress. The attack is not a warning. It is an attempt to neutralize the threat as efficiently as possible. That is a meaningful distinction. Most dangerous animals have a warning phase. The cassowary's warning phase is brief and often missed. And once the decision has been made, what follows is fast, forceful, and aimed at the most vulnerable parts of whatever is in front of it. April 12, 2019, Gainesville, Florida. Marlon Odin was 75 years old. He kept cassowaries on his property in Alachua County. Not a wildlife reserve, not a zoo, but a private farm. He had kept the birds for years. On that morning, he fell near one of the cassowaries. The bird attacked him almost immediately. He suffered deep lacerations and severe injuries consistent with the bird's inner claw. He was transported to the hospital, where he later died. It was the first recorded cassowary fatality in the United States in modern times. What makes this case significant beyond its tragedy is the context. Odin was experienced. He was not naive about what these animals were. He had been around them long enough to know their behavior. And the attack still happened, because cassowaries are not animals whose danger diminishes with familiarity. Familiarity, in some documented cases, increases the risk. Birds raised in close proximity to humans lose their wariness while retaining their territorial instincts, producing an animal that feels no need to signal aggression before acting on it. The bird did not malfunction. It did not act out of character. It responded to a vulnerable human in its space, the way its biology told it to. The most documented early cassowary fatality on record occurred in Queensland, Australia, in April 1926. Two brothers, Philip and Vic McLean, were hunting on their family property when they encountered a cassowary. Philip, who was 16, attempted to kill the bird with a club. The bird went down briefly, then recovered. As Philip attempted to flee, he slipped and fell. The cassowary kicked him once in the neck, severing his jugular vein. He died within minutes. His younger brother, 13 years old, watched it happen and was unable to intervene in time. This case is cited repeatedly in ornithological literature, not because it is the most dramatic cassowary attack on record, but because it is the most instructive. Every element that makes cassowaries lethal is present. The speed of the recovery, the targeting of a downed victim, the single strike with lethal precision, the complete absence of extended combat. It was over almost immediately. Cassowaries don't need multiple attempts. One kick in the wrong place is enough. In the wet tropics of northern Queensland, the only place in Australia where cassowaries live in the wild, attacks on humans are not rare historical events. They are an ongoing reality managed by wildlife authorities, tourist operators, and communities that share territory with an animal that has been there far longer than any of them. Between 1990 and the present day, Queensland's Department of Environment has recorded dozens of cassowary incidents involving humans, ranging from bluff charges to full contact attacks resulting in hospitalization. The majority involve feeding. Tourists or residents who have offered food to cassowaries, conditioning the birds to associate humans with resources, producing animals that become aggressive when that expectation isn't met. In Mission Beach, a small coastal community in the heart of cassowary habitat, locals have developed an almost ritualized caution around the birds. Wildlife corridors are mapped. Road signs are genuine warnings, not decorations. Residents know which individual birds have territorial ranges that overlap with certain streets, certain backyards, certain walking paths. The cassowary doesn't visit human spaces by accident. It lives there. The community exists inside its territory. That inversion of expectation, the bird is not the intruder, you are, is something the wildlife managers in that region will tell you, is the single most important thing people need to understand. Cassowaries are not considered highly intelligent in the way corvids or parrots are understood to be. They don't use tools. They don't demonstrate the kind of problem-solving behavior that researchers use to benchmark cognitive complexity. But they remember. Individual cassowaries have been documented returning to specific locations where they received food, sometimes years after the last feeding event. They recognize individual humans across repeated encounters. Wildlife managers in Queensland report birds that respond differently to familiar versus unfamiliar people, not with reduced aggression toward those they know, but with more direct, less tentative behavior. The caution that an unfamiliar entity might trigger is absent. They know you're not a threat, which means they also know they don't need to hesitate. There is something deeply counterintuitive about that. An animal that has learned you are harmless is not therefore less dangerous to you. It is more dangerous because it has removed the one buffer that might have bought you a second to respond. Their spatial memory is also significant. A cassowary's home range can cover several square kilometers of dense rainforest. Within that range, the bird tracks fruiting cycles, water sources, and competitor movements with a precision that requires sustained environmental mapping. This is not simple instinct. It is learned, updated, individual knowledge. The animal operating on that knowledge when it encounters you is not running on basic programming. It has a history, a territory, and a set of associations it brings to every interaction. There are fewer than 4,000 southern cassowaries left in the wild. Their primary threats are habitat loss, vehicle strikes, and dog attacks, 3 consequences of human expansion into their territory. In Queensland, cassowaries are struck by cars with enough frequency that wildlife groups maintain rehabilitation programs specifically for vehicle collision survivors. This is the context the fear lives inside. An animal ancient enough to have watched ecosystems rise and fall around it, reduced to 4,000 individuals navigating a landscape that increasingly belongs to something else. An animal that carries no concept of retreat, no evolutionary memory of losing, and a weapon that took millions of years to develop. Now sharing roads, backyards, and walking trails with people who mostly think it looks interesting. The people who work with cassowaries professionally, the researchers, the wildlife carers, the rangers in the wet tropics, all describe the same experience when asked about their relationship with these birds. Respect so deep it functions like a different instinct. Not the respect you perform for something powerful, the respect you feel in your body, before your mind has finished processing what it's looking at. That response is not irrational. It is calibrated. It is the correct reading of an animal that has been perfecting itself since before our species existed. You should be afraid of cassowaries, not because they are predators, not because they hunt, but because they are territorial, ancient, armed with a weapon designed for destruction, and completely indifferent to what you think the rules of engagement should be. The deep sea hides creatures in darkness too complete to reach. The Arctic produces a predator that hunts with patience and intelligence across hundreds of miles of ice. The African river conceals a 3,000-pound animal that needs no reason to kill you. The cassowary asks something different from all of them. It stands in a rainforest that still exists, barely, and it looks at you with those evaluating eyes. And it asks a simple question. Do you understand where you are? The answer, for most people, is no. And in cassowary territory, that ignorance is not a minor gap in knowledge. It is a vulnerability the bird will not hesitate to exploit. The rainforest is still here. The cassowary is still here. It was here long before you arrived, and it does not recognize your presence as anything other than a variable in its territory to be assessed, tolerated, or eliminated. It has had 50 million years to get that calculation right. You have had about 30 seconds.